I'm Brandy Cruz, and this is Undivided. Today, a new month, a new variant, and what it says about the government's short-term decision-making. Also, the one headline that the press just can't seem to get right. Plus, a lesson in how not to handle a crisis as a public agency. Thank you so much for joining us on Undivided. The Omicron variant is making headlines.
For months, it was Delta. Now, scientists are turning their attention to a new COVID-19 variant called Omicron.
A new variant of a virus isn't anything new. In fact, it's a predictable scenario. But in our world of media-driven overreaction, it's a scenario that ends up playing out something like this. Just as restrictions start to ease, a new variant arises. Health experts urge caution. The media then spreads worry and fear. And elected leaders react by taking extreme actions. By now, we should be fully aware that COVID is a rapidly changing pandemic, that optimism one day could be followed by uncertainty the next, or that mandates put in place one week might not be necessary a month down the road. But rather than treat the pandemic with a level of nuance that would help Americans make informed and rational decisions about their health and safety, the media would rather scare people shitless.
In a world fatigued by waves of COVID-19, now renewed fear
of a new variant even more contagious than Delta.
And don't get me wrong, a new variant is concerning. But the reality is we still don't know some very important information with any degree of certitude. Like, is Omicron more deadly or more contagious? Is it resistant to current vaccines? Without knowing the answers to those critical questions, the media just throws the worst-case scenario out there as a possibility, as if their job is to plant seeds of anxiety in people's brains.
There is a new variant of COVID, and experts are worried it may be worse than the Delta variant.
Again, it's not about ignoring real threats. It's about understanding the true risk before running headlines like this. Somewhere in the chain of events I described earlier, we've lost the ability to act rationally. And I would argue that moment comes at about step 4, as some in the media package what health experts say into something short and snazzy for the 5 o'clock news. And then you have elected leaders who feed off of that fear and make long-term decisions for what could be a short-term scenario. For example, firing government workers for refusing to get the existing COVID-19 vaccine. Should the Omicron variant prove resistant to current vaccines, then everyone with a shot could be in the same position as those without it. But rather than figure out how to deal with unvaccinated workers in the short term, knowing the crisis is likely to change or hopefully improve over time, elected leaders put people out of work, a decision that can't easily be undone. Not to mention the truly bizarre way in which the reality of breakthrough cases is ignored as a legitimate reason to at least ask some hard questions about the cost-benefit of vaccine mandates. More on that in our new segment, Unfiltered. Headlines alerting us to breakthrough cases of COVID-19 have been nonstop since the vaccines rolled out. Stories about celebrities experiencing breakthrough cases being a favorite pastime of the press. In fact, you don't even have to be an A-list celebrity for the media to let Americans know that you contracted a breakthrough case of COVID.
From Dancing with the Stars, Cheryl Burke revealed she has tested positive for COVID.
As she announced overnight, she has a breakthrough case of COVID.
The absolute obsession with reporting on breakthrough cases was simple. Treat them like they're rare, like they're a special event, and ignore the fact that they're really not. Now, we could give the press the benefit of the doubt, especially early on when these cases were just starting to pop up. After all, we'd been told that the vaccine would protect us at a rate of nearly 100%. But as the months went by, breakthrough cases became more and more common, threatening to derail the narrative that the vaccines would be our path out of the pandemic. So as the government changed its narrative, the media changed its narrative too. Now, breakthrough cases were a sign that the vaccine was indeed working, because people who got breakthrough cases weren't getting as sick.
It's very rare, first of all, to even have a breakthrough case. And on top of that, it's extremely rare for someone to be hospitalized.
And it is true, the numbers show you are more likely to die from COVID if you do not have a vaccine. But that is, again, an oversimplification, something the press is very good at. The truth is, some are not only getting sick, but dying from COVID complications even after being fully vaccinated. Here in Washington State, the Department of Health provides all of that information in detail on its website. Since the start of 2021, nearly 76,000 breakthrough cases have been identified in our state. 748 of those people died of COVID-related illness, most with underlying health conditions. Now imagine if, just for a second, instead of running endless headlines about B-list celebrities coming down with breakthrough cases of COVID, the media instead used all the information and data at its disposal to paint an accurate and informative picture of the potential risk for not only those who are vaccinated, but those who aren't. It's really not a hard thing to do, but it might not garner as many clicks as learning which Dancing with the Stars judge got sick despite getting the jab. After 7 straight losses in the Apple Cup, the Washington State Cougars finally pulled out a win with a 40-13 trouncing of the University of Washington Huskies. Here they are, bringing the cup back to the Palouse. After the game, exuberant and dejected fans alike left the stadium in droves to either celebrate with or drown themselves in a few drinks. And like responsible adults, many left their keys at home and instead opted for public transportation. After all, Seattle's new and very expensive Link Light Rail extension is now up and running. Or is it? Let's discuss in our segment, Unbelievable. Let's just say the excitement of the Apple Cup didn't end for these fans, who were forced to self-evacuate a disabled train car underground after being left completely in the dark about why it had suddenly stopped. With no explanation or instructions for a half hour, the fans tried to evacuate on their own. The whole thing played out in real time on Twitter, with fans posting videos and photos from the train cars and the tunnels. In response, Sound Transit stopped both north and southbound train service so that the fans walking on the tracks didn't get hit by a train. That makes sense, but what doesn't make sense is why Sound Transit, clearly aware that the fans had cell service, didn't put out any messages on social media or emergency alerts to let them know what the heck was going on. In fact, it took a whole 13 hours for Sound Transit to put out a statement about what happened. And that statement came in the form of a series of tweets that lacked any semblance of self-awareness. A Link light rail train became disabled in the northbound tunnel between University of Washington Station and U District Station after the electronic cable linking the first car and the trailing 3 cars was severed. As a result, the train came to an immediate stop. Sound Transit went on to write, "With the severed cable preventing the operator from communicating by intercom with passengers in the trailing 3 cars, an unsafe incident developed when passengers decided to use emergency exits to leave the train." Ah yes, the unsafe incident developed when fans left the train. Definitely not when the cars suddenly stopped, throwing some of them several feet from their seats. Sound Transit immediately followed its safety procedures by suspending service in both tunnels to protect passengers until they could be removed safely via a rescue train. There were no injuries. I'm very glad that Sound Transit immediately followed its safety procedures. And by immediately, of course, I mean an hour after the real safety emergency began. Sound Transit is launching a thorough investigation of this incident to determine the root cause and address any future vulnerabilities. The investigation will include a review of measures to ensure passengers stay on board the train during such incidents for their safety, and how to better communicate with riders during service disruptions. We apologize for the considerable inconvenience to our passengers. Considerable inconvenience doesn't even come close. But the worst part of all of this isn't how much of the blame they put on passengers themselves. It's how poorly prepared a major transit agency is for an emergency. While one detached rail car during a busy travel time is serious, things can get a whole lot worse. Terror attacks, mass casualty incidents, a natural disaster, the list goes on. One wonders whether Sound Transit spent as much time planning for emergencies as it did deciding what art to put on display at the new stations. For as much time as local leaders spent lauding the light rail's expansion with press releases and videos, today their priority should be answering to passengers who were quite literally left in the dark. Because the next time there's an emergency, riders might not be able to rescue themselves. Thank you so much for joining us on Undivided. I'm Brandy Cruz. If you haven't already, make sure to subscribe here on YouTube and join me on Patreon, patreon.com/undivided. Have a new episode of the Undivided podcast coming your way tomorrow.